join me as we paint this quaint little stony cottage and these cute little sheep. I start off by wetting down the area that's going to be my sky. I just want a light layer of water. I'm going to be using my Prussian Blue for my sky. It looks pretty bright and vibrant right now, but it will dry to a duller, softer blue. So I'm going in kind of deep here because I know that it's going to lighten up. I didn't draw out where I was putting my clouds. I'm kind of just deciding as I go. All I know is that I want them to be soft and kind of more in the background. Once I place my paint, I just take a little bit of tissue and I'm just kind of tapping out to soften up the edges of the clouds. I just keep tapping until I'm happy. I kind of turn my tissue to kind of keep it being soft. I love playing around with the clouds. It's always a shame that it only takes a few minutes to do the sky because I really love doing clouds. Take my hair dryer, just kind of dry those clouds so I can move on to the next thing. And now you can see how soft those clouds in the sky are. Now we're going to start working on the hills. This little section here is a hill kind of in the distance, so it's going to be a little softer. I'm taking some of my Serpentine green, just sticking in a watery layer. I want this area just to be really faint. Then I realized I forgot to lay down my masking fluid. This is the drawing gum that I use. I'll list all the supplies that I use in the description. I'm taking a very cheap little brush, get it wet and rub it in some soap. It kind of helps protect the brush from getting gummy and ruined. And I need to lay down my masking fluid on my little sheep and my cottage, so I can really work with the green field and the green hills without worrying about getting it in the areas that are not going to be green. These sheep are pretty tiny, so it was a little challenging getting the masking fluid where I wanted it. I just take my time here. This little trick will definitely pay off in the end. It just makes it so much easier. I just need to go around the edges. I don't need to worry about painting the inside of the cottage with the masking fluid. Now I'm just going to pre-wet my hill. So I just want the next layer just to go on softly. I'm going to start off again with that Serpentine green. What I really like about this color, this is a Daniel Smith color, is that it gradiates, and so as it dries it kind of has the green, almost kind of, I don't know, very bright green and a little bit of brown in there, and as it kind of separates it kind of creates a texture that's really cool. So I just kind of put that down as my first layer, and then I'm going to be adding in some Sap Green to kind of add some vibrancy and a little more depth. In the end, this will kind of help give it depth and not look so flat. I took a little bit of olive green here. I'm just going to start filling in where some of my trees are. Just kind of getting that first layer of color down. I did let the green of the hill dry first before I put down my trees. I kind of lost a little bit of my pencil marks where some of these bushes and trees were, but really what I had mapped out before, what I had drawn out before, was just kind of an idea of where I wanted my trees and bushes to be. So if it doesn't look exactly like my line drawing, it really doesn't matter. So I'm just like trying to fill in where I think I drew those lines. I drew, my pre-drawing was a little bit light, and normally I don't lose my pencil marks, but for some reason I lost them this time, and I can see them faintly, but really I want these trees and bushes to not be very detailed. So if they're just kind of a cluster and don't have much definition, that's actually the look I'm going for. I don't want to get super detailed with this painting. And as we build the color as we go in each layer, we'll add a little more depth to the greenery that I'm sticking in right now. I'm not too worried about it just yet. While my trees are still wet, I'm just adding in a little bit of the sap green, adding in a little bit of shadow. Got one more tree that I need to place. This one is the closest one to us in this painting, so it'll be the darkest of all the trees and bushes that I'm doing. Just placing a little shadow under the trees so they're not just floating on the hill. Now we're just going to add in some faint little tree trunks with our raw umber, or whatever brown that you have or choose to use. Doesn't really matter. Now time for our grassy field. Once again, I'm just going to pre-wet that whole grassy area. And since our sheep are covered in masking fluid, we can go right over the top of them and not even worry. Taking the really vibrant sap green here and just laying it in. This is our first layer of color. We'll be adding more later as we go. I guess here I'm kind of mixing a little of my sap green and my serpentine green. I'm just playing and having fun. I love mixing colors. It don't really like using colors just straight out of the tube because I just have too much fun mixing. And here's a fun little trick that I do sometimes. I take this little embossing tool that is used to kind of press down and emboss paper, and I'm just kind of pressing it on the paper, creating some little grassy areas. Some people take like the corner of an old credit card and kind of use that to scrape the surface. But I just have this little embossing tool and it works really well, and it just makes the color kind of seep into where you've pressed down, and it creates kind of fun little way of making grass. I thought I would show you that little trick today. We'll add more grass in later with our brush, but it's just kind of fun to use a little bit different technique to get that grassy texture. We're just going to continue to build the color here on our grass, adding a little more of that green in where I want more shadows. Adding in a little more shadow into that tree. I'm using a lot of different brushes for this painting, and really as I'm painting, I'm just kind of deciding what feels good for me at the moment. For the size painting I'm working on, some of the bigger areas that I was doing, I was using my oval wash brush. It's a 1/2 inch oval wash brush, and now I'm using my size 8 round brush. And then as we get into some of the smaller detail, I'll start moving into some of my smaller round brushes. But really, for a painting like this, I honestly don't think there's a wrong brush to use. When you're trying to lay in a larger wash of color, you want to use a bigger brush. And when you want more control over detail, you use a smaller brush. But really, this is about you figuring out what is comfortable for you to use. I used my hair dryer to dry my grassy areas, and that also warmed up my masking fluid. So I'm just kind of using my eraser now to rub off that masking fluid. And now we get to start on our charming little cottage. Using a little bit of my burnt umber, and now a little bit of my burnt sienna. Once again, using my handy hair dryer so I can start on the next layer. Bringing in my burnt sienna again just to add a little bit of that thatched roof texture. I still want it to be really soft looking. I don't really want detail. I just want kind of the appearance of that texture. Now I'm kind of taking a mixture of my Moonglow. It's my Daniel Smith Moonglow and a little bit of Payne's Gray. kind of creating a really watery shadow. The Payne's gray for me is a little too dark and too chalky, and the Daniel Smith Moonglow is just really soft, kind of gradiates kind of a purpley gray color that just adds a lot of interest to a painting. So now I'm just kind of adding that mixture to kind of create the shadowed side of the cottage. As I start doing the stonework on the cottage, I'm going to be doing some different mixtures. Here I took my Moonglow and took a little bit of my raw umber, and that turned out a little too dark, so I'm just going to take a little tissue, just kind of tap that out so it's just on there really faintly. I'm going to add in a little shadow for my little sheep. These little guys aren't going to get very much detail. It's just going to be a hint of shadow. Decided to kind of work on that while I still had my little watery mixture handy. Taking some of that Payne's gray in my tiniest of brushes. I think I'm using here my little select spotter brush that's a 5/0, so it's pretty tiny. I just want a little hint of their faces. I think I actually moved to my even smaller brush. It's an 18/0, so it's a very tiny spotter brush. It's called a short liner brush. Because this painting is only a 5/7, so these little sheep are not very big. But I just love that we're coming to this part of the painting where we're getting to place those little guys in and just kind of create that charming little character of the painting. got a little bit of a stone wall in the background. We're just going to kind of lay that in. A little mixture there of some titanium buff mixed in with my Payne's Gray and my Moonglow, because I just want this little stonework to be super, super soft. And the titanium buff is kind of an off-white, just help that stonework to be a little softer and kind of helps give a little bit different tone than the other stones that I'd already put in there. I'm going to be making my door and window red, and it's kind of off the screen, but I picked a red and I added a little bit of my raw umber in there so that it will be kind of more of a weathered red. This kind of helps make this little cottage look extra charming. It's just a little pop of color. When I was doing research on little Irish cottages, a lot of these little white stone with the red trimmed windows and red doors popped up, and I'm like, oh, I loved them. So we're going to be doing that with our little cottage. I'm just going to add a little bit of the stones for the stone wall, just a little hint of stones. Really isn't any detail in there at all. Now we're just going to add our last little layers of details, where I'm adding in more grass and probably some more shadow. I'm just trying to mix a little darker shadow color here. I want my shadows to pop out just a little bit more than they are. This is where I'm kind of creating a little more of that depth. Originally in my line drawing, I had a little fence that went all the way across. There was like a little wood fence, and as I was painting, I decided, that detail will just get lost, and so I just took that out and I think it looks perfectly fine without it. It's one of the things we can do with our paintings is we can add things, we can take away things, and just make it our own. And I realized I forgot my little line of little trees that kind of split the little fields in two. I just want them to be super soft because those are so far in the distance that you just can kind of see them through a little haze. It really separates those two fields really nicely. And we're just kind of finishing up the last little details. Really, at any point, you can just be done with your painting. I'm just kind of working on my shadows and the little areas and shrubbery that I want to be just a little bit darker. I've been looking at my painting up close for so long that I'm starting to add in probably more detail than I need, but it's just soft little detail. Just adding in a little more grass in the foreground. And there you have it, your cute Irish cottage with your fuzzy little sheep. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, that you learned something new, that you want to try something new, and that you're going to give this tutorial a try. Leave me a comment and let me know what tutorials you'd like to see next.